The kingdom of God is within you. These timeless words attributed to Jesus of Nazareth rise through history like a whisper from eternity, calling each of us toward a truth so profound that most people spend their entire lives without daring to face it. Think about that for a moment. Imagine that every teaching, every parable, every symbol Jesus ever shared was pointing not to an external paradise beyond the clouds, but to a hidden realm inside the very core of your being. A realm that cannot decay, cannot be stolen, cannot be touched by the chaos of the world. A realm that is both the origin and the destiny of the human soul. Now imagine that humanity has spent centuries searching for meaning in temples, traditions, doctrines, philosophies, and cosmic theories, all the while forgetting the most important spiritual direction ever given: look within. What if the greatest spiritual secret Jesus tried to reveal was not about the afterlife, not about moral regulation, not even about religion, but about awakening to the divine presence that lives silently inside every human being? Today, we step into a mystery that few explore, not because it is hidden, but because it is deeply internal. And the greatest paradox of all is that the inner world, though invisible, is far more expansive than anything the physical world can offer. Before we dive deeper, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, comment, and share this video. What we are about to explore has the power to shift your understanding of life and reality itself, especially because the final revelation, which will come at the end of this video, is the most transformative of all. Let us begin our journey by returning to the teachings of Jesus with fresh eyes. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus states clearly that the kingdom of God does not come with observable signs. He tells his listeners that they will not be able to say, "Here it is" or "There it is," because the kingdom is already within them. This single statement dismantles centuries of belief that the divine is something external, distant, and accessible only through intermediaries. Instead, it suggests that the spiritual journey is, above all else, an inward pilgrimage. Many scholars have explored this idea in depth. Elaine Pagels, known for her work with the Nag Hammadi texts, reveals that several early Christian writings emphasized an inner awakening rather than external ritual. Bart Ehrman, a leading historian of early Christianity, demonstrates how diverse the early interpretations of Jesus' teachings were, showing that the internal, mystical dimension was more widespread than many realize. Meister Eckhart, a medieval Christian mystic, taught that God is born in the soul when one becomes still enough to recognize the divine spark already present. Henry Corbin, an expert in mystical traditions, expanded on the idea of an imaginal realm, a spiritual dimension accessible through inner perception rather than physical sight. These thinkers, though separated by centuries, echo a unified message. The real temple, the real kingdom, the real encounter with the divine happens inside. Jesus himself often pointed to this truth through parables. The kingdom is like a mustard seed, he said, something tiny, invisible to the untrained eye, yet capable of becoming the greatest of trees. The kingdom is like treasure, hidden in a field, unnoticed by most, but priceless to the one who discovers it. These metaphors all point to a truth that cannot be found through physical observation, but only through inner awakening. And this raises a powerful question for you. What if your entire life you have been carrying a divine treasure inside without knowing it? What if the longing you feel, the restlessness, the spiritual hunger, the desire for meaning, are not signs of emptiness but signs of something sacred calling you inward? Reflect on that. Do you feel, even faintly, that there is more within you than what you have been taught to see? Share your thoughts in the comments. The journey inward is not always easy. Many avoid it because the inner world contains not only the light of the divine, but also the shadows we try to ignore. Yet Jesus consistently taught that truth is the path to freedom. And truth, real truth, is always found inside, never outside. Imagine, just for a moment, realizing that the presence you seek, the peace you crave, the meaning you long for, has always been silently waiting in the depths of your consciousness. Imagine understanding that Jesus' mission was not to create followers, but to awaken individuals to their own inner divinity, their own connection to the eternal. Imagine discovering that every step you have taken towards spiritual understanding has been guiding you back to yourself, back to the inner kingdom Jesus spoke of. And this is only the beginning. The deeper layers of this mystery reveal insights that can transform the way you perceive spirituality, reality, and your own soul. The most powerful revelation of all awaits in the final part of this journey. Imagine standing before a vast doorway that leads not to a physical place, but to a dimension of consciousness that Jesus hinted at repeatedly. A dimension where the boundaries between the human and the divine become thin, almost transparent. This is the secret kingdom he spoke of, a kingdom not built with stone or governed by earthly rulers, but one that unfolds in the intimate landscape of the inner self. And as we move deeper into this exploration, the question becomes unavoidable. Why did Jesus choose to speak in parables, metaphors, and symbols when referring to this inner kingdom? Why cloak such profound truths in language that seems simple on the surface, yet reveals extraordinary depth to those who truly reflect? Some of the greatest scholars of spirituality have proposed that Jesus taught in this way because the inner kingdom cannot be grasped by intellect alone. It must be experienced. Think about that. A truth so transformative that it cannot be imposed from the outside. It must be awakened from within. Elaine Pagels observed that many early Christian writings emphasize personal knowledge, not merely belief, personal knowing, a direct interior encounter with the divine presence. In this sense, the words of Jesus become less like commandments and more like keys meant to unlock latent spiritual perception. And this leads us to a profound realization. Jesus' teachings were not only spiritual instructions, they were invitations to transformation. Just as a seed must die to become a tree, the surface identity of the human self must dissolve to reveal the deeper essence beneath it. When Jesus said that one must be born again, perhaps he was not referring to a ritual or formal declaration, but to a shift of consciousness, a new way of perceiving reality from the inside out, a death of the false self and the birth of the true self. That interpretation has been explored by mystics such as Meister Eckhart, who insisted that the birth of God in the soul is the ultimate purpose of spiritual life. But why is this so difficult for people to grasp? Consider how much of your own life has been shaped by external expectations, social conditioning, obligations, fears, and inherited beliefs. The outer world pulls at us constantly. Yet Jesus repeatedly redirected attention inward, urging people to find the light within themselves. The eye is the lamp of the body, he said. If your perception is clear, your whole being becomes full of light. But if your perception is clouded by fear, ignorance, or attachment, then the inner light becomes obscured. Notice that he did not say the light disappears, he said it becomes hidden, and this hiddenness is essential to the mystery. The kingdom is within you, but it remains unseen until something awakens it. Scholars like Henry Corbin wrote extensively about the spiritual imagination, not as fantasy, but as an organ of perception capable of sensing realities that lie beyond the physical senses. Think about that. An inner eye dormant in most people that Jesus sought to open. When he healed the blind in the Gospels, perhaps the physical miracles symbolized something deeper, the opening of spiritual sight. What if the miracles themselves were messages, not merely displays of power, but symbolic acts pointing to the inner transformation he wished for every human being? The blind see, the deaf hear, the dead rise, the lost are found. These are not only physical events, they reflect what happens inside a person who discovers the secret kingdom. When inner sight awakens, you begin to see yourself and the world in an entirely new way. When inner hearing sharpens, you become attuned to the still, subtle voice of truth within. When the inner being awakens, it feels as if you have risen from the dead into a new life. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, have there been moments in your life when you felt a sudden clarity, a sudden stillness, a moment of profound understanding or peace that seemed to come from nowhere? Moments that felt like a whisper from something deeper within you? These are not accidents. Many seekers describe such experiences as glimpses of the inner kingdom. Share in the comments if you have ever felt something like this, even faintly. Your reflections may help others recognize what has long been stirring inside them as well. Jesus' message was simple yet revolutionary. The kingdom is already here, already accessible, already alive in the depths of your being. But to enter it, one must turn inward. And that turning requires courage. It requires stepping away from the noise of the world and into the silence of the soul. It requires recognizing that the divine is not something you need to chase, but something you need to uncover. Saint Augustine famously wrote that God is closer to you than you are to yourself, an idea remarkably consistent with the teachings of Jesus about the inner kingdom. Yet the more we explore this mystery, the more apparent it becomes that the ultimate truth Jesus hinted at is far more vast than most interpretations reveal. We are only beginning to uncover its depths, and the greatest revelation, the one that reshapes everything, awaits at the end of this journey. Imagine walking through your life unaware that an entire universe exists behind your thoughts, beneath your emotions, and beyond your ordinary sense of self. A universe Jesus called the kingdom within. As we progress deeper into this exploration, it becomes clear that Jesus was not simply offering moral guidance or spiritual comfort. He was revealing a pathway into a higher state of consciousness, one that dissolves the separation between the divine and the human. This is a truth so profound that many of his listeners could not grasp it, because they were expecting a kingdom made of thrones and crowns, not an awakening of the soul. To understand the depth of this teaching, we must revisit how Jesus described this inner realm. He often said the kingdom is like a hidden treasure or a pearl of great price, something so valuable that once a person discovers it, they willingly let go of everything else. Scholars such as Elaine Pagels and Henry Corbin suggest that these metaphors were not only symbolic, but instructional. They teach that the inner kingdom cannot be accessed by accumulating more beliefs, but by releasing the illusions that blind us to what is already present. This idea becomes clearer when we consider the statement Jesus made repeatedly: "Those who have eyes to see, let them see." This phrase appears simple, but its meaning is immense. It implies that ordinary sight is not enough to perceive the truth. There is another way of seeing, an inner vision, a spiritual perception that is awakened only through introspection and inner stillness. According to Meister Eckhart, this inner vision arises when the mind becomes empty of distractions, when the heart becomes receptive and the person becomes aware of the divine spark within. But what blocks this vision? Why do so many people live without ever glimpsing the inner kingdom? The great mystics and scholars point to a common answer: identification with the external world. When a person believes they are only their body, their job, their history, or their ego, their awareness becomes trapped at the surface level of existence. Jesus warned against this many times, urging his followers not to cling to external illusions. He called them to a deeper identity, a timeless identity rooted in their connection to the divine. And here lies a profound question for you to consider. What if most of your suffering, confusion, and spiritual longing comes from forgetting who you really are? What if the teachings of Jesus serve not merely to guide behavior, but to remind human beings of their forgotten origin? Reflect for a moment on the times in your life when you felt a sense of being lost or disconnected. Were those not moments when you felt separated from your own inner truth? And have there not also been moments, however small, when you felt suddenly aligned, peaceful, and aware of something sacred inside yourself? These glimpses are not random. They are messages from the inner kingdom. Many scholars argue that this kingdom is not a place but a state of consciousness in which a person experiences unity instead of separation, clarity instead of confusion, peace instead of fear. This interpretation aligns with the work of Henry Corbin, who described the inner spiritual realm as more real than the physical world because it is not dependent on time or matter. It is eternal, unchanging, and always accessible, though few know how to enter it consciously. Jesus gave clues for entering this state. Consider his teachings about prayer. He taught to enter a quiet room and close the door, not to be seen by others. This instruction is deeply symbolic. The room is the inner self. Closing the door means withdrawing attention from the external world. The prayer is not verbal repetition, but silent communion with the divine presence within. This is consistent with the view of spiritual masters like Meister Eckhart, who spoke of a silent ground of the soul where God and the human essence meet as one. Now imagine what it would mean to truly access that space. Imagine awakening to a dimension within yourself where fear loses its power, where truth becomes clear, and where love is not something you seek, but something that flows naturally from your deepest being. Imagine discovering that the presence you have been searching for your entire life has never left your side. Imagine realizing that Jesus' teachings were never about leading you outward, but about leading you inward, back to the divine source hidden within your own consciousness. But here is where the mystery becomes even more extraordinary. Jesus did not say the kingdom is near, or coming, or reserved only for the righteous. He said it is within. He said it is already here, which means the journey is not about creating something new, but about remembering something ancient, something eternal, something that belongs to you by birthright. And yet, as profound as all this is, we have not reached the deepest revelation. The greatest truth Jesus tried to share, the truth that transforms everything, is still ahead. It is a truth that reshapes not only how we understand the kingdom, but how we understand ourselves, our purpose, and our connection to the divine. Imagine for a moment that everything you have ever believed about yourself is incomplete, not wrong, but incomplete. Imagine that beneath every thought, emotion, and experience, there exists a deeper layer of your being, one that Jesus tried to awaken in every person he encountered. As we arrive at the final part of this journey, we move toward the most powerful revelation Jesus offered about the secret kingdom within. It is a truth so transformative that, if fully understood, it changes the way you see yourself, others, and the entire universe. Throughout his teachings, Jesus consistently redirected attention away from rigid doctrines, social structures, and external authorities. Instead, he guided people toward introspection, silence, and inner awareness. Consider how many times he withdrew alone to the mountains or the desert. Scholars like Bart Ehrman and Elaine Pagels note that Jesus often taught that true spiritual understanding does not come from outward observation, but from inner transformation. He repeatedly emphasized that the eyes, ears, and hearts must be opened. This opening is not physical, it is spiritual. So what is the great revelation at the heart of this message? It is the recognition that the divine presence Jesus spoke of is not external, distant, or exclusive. It is already within you, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but truly. The kingdom within is the presence of the divine spark at the core of your being. Jesus was not merely pointing to God. He was pointing to the divine nature hidden within every human soul. When he said that the kingdom of God is within, he was declaring that the essence of God, the essence of truth, the essence of eternity, is already alive inside you. This understanding is echoed by some of the greatest mystics and theologians in history. Meister Eckhart taught that there is something in the soul that is uncreated and uncreatable, something divine that unites the human being directly with God. Henry Corbin described the inner spiritual world as a realm where the human soul encounters its divine origin. These insights illuminate the true depth of Jesus' message. The kingdom is not a destination, but a discovery. It is the awakening to who you really are beneath the layers of conditioning and illusion. Think about how revolutionary this idea truly is. If the divine is within you, then the search for meaning, purpose, and connection cannot be fulfilled through external pursuits alone. No material success, no social validation, no external power can satisfy the longing of the soul. That longing is not a weakness. It is the call of the inner kingdom. It is the invitation to return to your spiritual home. Consider the many times Jesus spoke about truth. He did not say truth is given by institutions or found in rituals. He said the truth will set you free. Freedom, then, is not merely liberation from external constraints. It is liberation from internal ignorance. It is the unveiling of your true nature. When you realize this, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see the world differently. You begin to see others differently. You begin to understand that every human being carries this same divine spark, even if they are unaware of it. This insight opens the door to a deeper compassion, a deeper connection, a deeper sense of unity with all of creation. The boundaries that once seemed so solid begin to dissolve. The judgments that once felt justified begin to soften. The fears that once controlled you begin to lose their power. This is the transformation Jesus spoke of when he described being born again. Not a physical rebirth, but a spiritual awakening into a new consciousness of life. And here is the final and most powerful truth. The kingdom within is not just a place of peace, it is a place of creation. It is the source of intuition, inspiration, wisdom, and inner strength. It is the place where your soul aligns with the divine and where your life begins to reflect your true spiritual identity. When Jesus said that those who believe in him would do works greater than his, he was pointing to this inner creative power. Not to elevate the ego, but to awaken the truth that the divine presence within you is capable of extraordinary transformation. both within your life and in the world around you. Now imagine living your life from that awareness. Imagine waking each day, knowing that the presence of God is not something you must seek, but something you carry. Imagine approaching your challenges not with fear, but with clarity and courage, knowing that you are connected to something infinite. Imagine loving others not because it is expected, but because you naturally perceive the divine spark within them, just as you have recognized it within yourself. This is the secret Jesus tried to reveal. This is the kingdom within. As we conclude this journey, reflect on what has resonated with you the most. Reflect on the moments in your life when you felt guided, inspired, or awakened. Reflect on the possibility that these were glimpses of the inner kingdom calling you home. And remember, the final revelation changes everything because it reminds you that the divine is not somewhere else. It is here. It is now. It is within you. This final truth is not the end. It is the beginning of your awakening. Thanks for looking.